Hello there, welcome to Books and Tea with Sarah. I'm yours truly. Today I wanted to talk about Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I'm going to start with a spoiler-free review and then I'm going to move on to some of my more spoiler thoughts about it. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with a summary about the book. Since she was young, Scarlett had been dreaming of seeing the traveling performance called Caraval that her grandmother told her so much about. This traveling performance involves the audience, but for Scarlett there were a few things that were standing in her way. First of all, you have to be invited to Caraval, and second of all, Scarlett's abusive father won't let her or her sister Tella leave the island that they live on. This doesn't matter though, because when Scarlett reaches age, her father matches her to a count that she's never met before and who doesn't live on the island. And this count is supposed to take care of Scarlett and her sister once Scarlett and the count get married. So Scarlett thinks that it's time for her to move on from her childhood dream of wanting to attend Caraval. But once Scarlett has accepted this, she receives an invitation from the master of Caraval. He sends her 3 tickets, one for Scarlett, one for her sister, and one for Scarlett's fiance. Scarlett and Tella find a way to escape the island with a sailor named Julian, and once they get to the island that Caraval takes place on, Tella ends up getting kidnapped, and she ends up being the thing that everyone at Caraval is supposed to find, kind of like a treasure hunt, and if Scarlett isn't able to find her, then she might lose her sister forever. So that's kind of a basic synopsis of the book. For one thing, I read this on audiobook, so some things weren't as clear to me because I wasn't reading it and I was on a commute, and so I might not have been paying attention at times, so there might be things that I missed. But otherwise, I love the audiobook. I love Rebecca Soler, who narrates it. She also narrated the Lunar Chronicles, which I listened to all 5 of those books. She's probably my favorite narrator, and any book that gets narrated by her, I will definitely listen to the audiobook instead of reading it. And this book did make me cringe a little bit because like there would be certain times where like she would scream no, and it was really dramatic and kind of stupid sounding. Still, I really loved the audiobook. As far as the writing, I wasn't as turned off by it as some people were. A lot of people felt like it was kind of gimmicky. I really enjoyed the link between colors and emotion, and I felt like that kind of played a part later in the book, that it was a subtle importance, but I felt like it was important. There were some descriptions that I felt like were kind of try hard. I mean, so this book, it was being promoted as the night circus, which I feel like a lot of people wrongly assumed that meant that it was going to be about a circus, I guess. While the atmosphere was similar because it was like a carnivalesque atmosphere, I felt like as far as like the plot and the atmosphere, it wasn't necessarily the same. I felt like it was more advertised as the night circus because of the description, but then I felt the description was kind of try hard. So I don't know if I was being overly judgmental about the description because it had been described as the night circus, but overall it did kind of bother me a little bit. Who knows if it'll translate better reading it versus listening to the audiobook. I guess I'll just have to see, since I do plan on picking up my own copy of this book. So next, let's talk about the characters. I do agree with a lot of people in the light that the characters come across as being one-dimensional, focusing on Scarlett since she is the primary character. So with her, she just felt overly concerned with Tella, first of all, because I mean, I understand she wanted to protect Tella from their father and everything, and Tella was the same way, but other than that, their relationship didn't go beyond that. It was difficult to see the best friend aspect of their relationship. It was also frustrating because so many people told her like, Tella's fine, she's just hidden for everyone to find her. It's not like she's chained up somewhere, but she didn't seem to understand that, and so she would just continue to worry about Tella. With that in mind, I wasn't really bothered by the fact that she was so one-dimensional. It definitely would have been nice to see her develop a little bit of a backbone so she could stand up to their father a little bit, but it didn't entirely bother me. It didn't take away from the book for me. So then with Tella, there isn't a whole lot to say about her because she's not in most of the book. The primary thing is like, I feel like she didn't care about Scarlett nearly as much as Scarlett cared about her. You get a little bit of justification at the end, but it definitely wasn't enough for me to change my stance on that. I did feel like Tella was portrayed kind of as Scarlett's better half. She pushes Scarlett to do things outside of her comfort zone and everything, and even when Tella isn't there through most of the book, Scarlett hears her voice in her head and uses that as a motivation to continue forward. But otherwise, Tella wasn't really that much of anything. I really enjoyed Julian's character. He was a very shady character, and I liked seeing his layers peeled back one by one throughout the book. And then the mayor and the count kind of of go hand in hand. I was a little frustrated with them because they have their motivations for why they do the things that they do, but then those motivations get negated towards the end. And the motivations also I don't think were very clear. I think a lot of people didn't pick up on it, which makes me think that it probably didn't come across very well. Even then, it seems like they don't have any reason for doing the things that they do. I mean, you would hope that a villain who physically abuses his daughters would at least have some sort of reasoning for why he does that. Not that it's a good reason, but it's still some reason nonetheless. So I was a little disappointed with that. All in all, with the characters, there was a lack of development overall that I feel like could have been more included in the book, but it's also a series, so maybe that'll develop more in the next book. So finally, with the plot, I really enjoyed this plot. I love puzzles, so that kind of made me really excited about this book. I really enjoyed kind of seeing Scarlet solve all the different clues and everything. But I will say I was a little disappointed because I felt like Scarlet was the only person trying to solve the clues. Like, we didn't see all these other people around her trying to figure out their own clues. Like, once in a while she would mention, oh, all these people were huddled up by the fireplace waiting for the doors to open, that type of thing. You would think more people would be chasing her because she was Tella's sister, and so who else would know better where Tella is than Tella's sister? It was too focused on Scarlet. I feel like for all that time that Scarlet was freaking out about her sister being gone, we could have seen other characters come into Scarlet's life to try to either put her off track or try to figure out what she knew. So that's it for my non-spoiler thoughts. I'm gonna go into some more detail about things that happened in the book. So if you read the book or you don't care about being spoiled about certain things, then stick around and keep watching. Otherwise, stop watching and then come back once you finish the book and we'll talk more in the comments. So first of all, the romance. One of my favorite things in YA is all the romances. I don't know, it just brings out the inner teenager with major crushes in me, I guess. So I really enjoyed this romance. I felt like it didn't take away from the story, especially because Scarlet was so worried about her sister that she didn't really have too much time to think about Julian and how she felt about him. I know a lot of people were bothered by it, especially because like she's engaged to the Count and she apparently loves the Count so much, but she's never met the Count. And I feel like with her spending so much time with Julian, she starts to realize this and realize that the Count doesn't matter so much to her because she's never met him. So I think that's part of my reasoning why it didn't bother me so much. Something I talked about earlier was the emotions linked with colors and how I felt like that kind of had a subtle importance later. While it wasn't important to the primary plot, I felt like it was a little important to the romance plotline because there was a point where Scarlet realized she was able to see Julian's emotions as colors. When that happened, it felt like she was saying that throughout the whole book she was only able to see her own emotions. So I kind of liked that aspect and how they brought that to light, and that's kind of why in the end that kind of description didn't bother me as much as it bothered other people. So I guess I'll talk about the mayor and the Count next. As far as their motivations, I felt like the mayor was motivated by the fact that once it was revealed, I understood that the mayor was probably motivated by the fact that Legend was trying to take his revenge on his family because of Scarlet and Tella's grandmother. So I felt like that kind of started to justify his actions for beating his daughters, trying to make them fear leaving the island so that they would never leave and they would never get hurt until someone else was there to protect them, like the Count. The only problem with that is then later all of that was negated because you were told that Legend was never trying to seek his revenge on the grandmother. Like, he didn't care about that, not to the extent that it seemed like when the game was going on. So at that point then it was like, well then why did all of this abuse happen? It felt like that wasn't the real reason that the mayor was beating his daughters. So that kind of made me a little frustrated because I felt like that whole situation, the revenge plotline, was introduced to Scarlet as part of the game. In which case it wouldn't be well known by the rest of the family, like the mayor, that Legend was trying to seek his revenge on his family. So with that in mind, then his motivations definitely weren't indicated anywhere in the book. And I hope that's something that gets brought up later. So with that in mind, I think the Count was just, I don't know what the deal was that he struck up with the mayor for the marriage. I can't remember what that was. But as far as why he was so evil, I felt like he understood the mayor's motivations for trying to protect Scarlet and Tella, and so he continued with that. But at some point he started to feel like it was too much, like they were going too far. I mean, for one instance, they killed Dante, and I think that probably gave him a little bit of a change of heart to the point where he was really uncomfortable with all of the evil things that they were doing. So that's how I kind of understood that, but also, like I said, what I understood as the mayor's motivations ended up being negated later, so who knows what was actually going on there. But like I said, hopefully we'll find out later. Finally, with Tella, I was just super frustrated with Tella. It was kind of similar to how like Scarlet cared so much about Tella. Like Tella cared so much about Scarlet, yet we didn't really see any of that. The author tried to explain it through all those letters that Scarlet sent back and forth with Legend, but I feel like it wasn't enough to show their relationship. And then like finally, I couldn't believe that Tella actually thought that the mayor would leave Scarlet alone if Tella killed herself. I feel like for someone like the mayor, if Tella killed herself, alright, fine. Then I'll just beat Scarlet whenever she does something wrong. I didn't feel like that gave enough motivation for Scarlet to be able to break free of the mayor. And then finally, the ending, the epilogue, it was too much. I honestly felt like this book should have just been a standalone. It doesn't need to be a series. I don't know how it will continue as a series. I guess we have to bring in the mother, but I think it's much better as a standalone, and I'm kind of disappointed that it's going to be a series, and I'm a little afraid of that. It was interesting because the audiobook has a little interview at the end with Stephanie Garber, and she talks about how she actually rewrote the ending. So that kind of makes me wonder if it was originally going to be a standalone, and then her editor convinced her to rewrite the epilogue so that it led into another book. I guess we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it ends up being pretty good and I end up being proven wrong. So that's it for this review. Let me know your thoughts about Caraval in the comments below. Make sure that you mark spoilers if you say any spoilers, because I'm sure a lot of people haven't read this book yet. Give me some critiques about this review. Tell me what you liked, what you didn't like, things I can improve on. That would be really helpful for future reviews that I do. And until my next video, I'll talk to you guys in the comments. Bye!